neglecting, or not necessarily neglecting, but not even thinking about the fact that there might be a God, and that there might not be any kind of connection there. And so we wanted to start a dialogue tonight to really talk about the fact that, or the possibility at least, I'll leave the facts up to Perry, but the possibility that the Bible is actually scientific, and that there is science in the Bible, and that they don't necessarily have to be at war with one another, but that they can work together. So I just want to also say, no matter who you are tonight, there's probably going to be some sort of challenge that you will struggle with as Perry is speaking. If you do have a faith, that might be challenged in what you came here thinking. And if you don't have a faith, that also might be challenged with what Perry might be saying here tonight. And I wanted to basically say, we welcome your thinking, we welcome your thoughts, we welcome your questions and your dialogue, and there will be a time for that at the end. Perry's going to speak for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and then there's going to be a question and answer period at the end, and you can ask him all sorts of questions. We would ask you to be respectful. We would ask you to be kind, to be gentle, and wait your turn. And we will definitely get around to you. We want to, if we can, answer your questions and help you maybe come to a better understanding for yourself. So, that being said, I just want to introduce our speaker, Perry Sherman. He's a friend of mine from my church. So there's that credential. He also has a BS in Polymer Science from Case Western Reserve University. He has a master's from Simon Greenleaf School of Law, and in Christian apologetics. So he has a master's in what he's going to be speaking about to some degree tonight. And he has a MS and a PhD from California School of Professional Psychology, clinical psychology. He's actually practicing that right now. He's working in Delmar in a Christian Counseling Associates. And he worked on the B-2 stealth bomber, which is pretty cool. I'm sure the government felt like he was safe enough and smart enough to do that, so maybe he can teach us a few things here tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Perry Sherman.
Thank you, Steve. I don't like being constrained, so let me see.
One more thing I wanted to say, and I apologize, but before I let you speak, there's these cards on your seat, and if you're looking for Christian fellowship on the campus, or you're interested and you want to take part in any of those groups, Campus Ambassadors meets on Tuesday, Impact meets on Wednesday, and Basic meets on Thursday. And there's also InterVarsity that is coming on campus soon, and I don't exactly know when they meet, but that's Tom right there, and he works with InterVarsity, so if you're interested in that, please go talk to him. But also you'll find a 8.5 by 11 sheet that looks like this, and that's just a really quick questionnaire that we would love if you would fill out. And there's some, it's a place for you to take notes and maybe write down some questions that you might have. We welcome you to do that. But also, if there's a question that you have that we didn't get to answer tonight for whatever reason, and also just to let us know how we did, because it's kind of a survey, if you would fill that out before you leave and make sure that, I guess I'll be the person that collects it, so please make sure I get that. I appreciate it. And thanks. Sorry for you, Eric.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. He works hard. I know he does. He's a good man, and I'm glad to be here. This is, so I'll begin with just a little bit about Bible and science. There's a lot of questions oftentimes about Bible and science, and oftentimes people will ask me, you have a degree in polymer science. I began in physics and then switched to chemistry, got both physics and chemistry, graduated with polymer science, and then I went into engineering. But along the way, I also went to law school to study how you analyze what happened in the past from a legal historical perspective, because there's a lot of people making religious claims, and the real question is which claims really are backed up by the facts, and the way to determine that is really using a legal, historical, scientific method. So you can do that. So I went to law school to study the best way to do that, because law is the way that you determine whether or not something actually happened or not in the past. You find the best way to do that. Somebody says, I stole his chicken. You did not. I did not steal his chicken. Yes, I did. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. So if they can't resolve the differences between themselves, somebody has to make that determination, and the legal kind of historical method is the way to do that. That's why I went to law school and studied those methods. Then I decided to go into clinical psychology because I'm very interested in all kinds of different things, and I was very interested in what makes people tick. So I really want to answer the questions of why. Why are things the way they are? I was not as satisfied with engineering because it was more how. How do you make this stick? How do you make this coating to make this airplane not be visible on radar? How do you develop this coating to last at high temperatures? But the questions of why things are the way they are, that's what I was really interested in. That's been my lifelong quest. So I'm gonna start with just asking a few questions. I'm gonna go, this is gonna be a little outline. I'm gonna go through these and I'm gonna answer these. First, how did the Bible influence the founding of science? Most people don't know. Did the Bible have a positive or a negative influence on science? Most people think there's a warfare maybe between science and religion. Religion kind of hinders scientific progress. We're going to have a look at that question. Second question, guess who were behind the founding of most of the world's great universities? Most people don't know this either. Who? What kind of people were really behind that? Were these people of faith or just people who did not believe in faith or didn't have any reverence for the Bible? Third, is the Bible scientific? Now I know that's a question that's kind of confusing to some people, but I'm also going to start with defining what is science. What's science? And we're going to apply really what science is to the question of, is the Bible scientific or is it non-scientific? Are miracles by definition unscientific? There's been an argument since the 1800s, started by Hume and the people before him, stating that miracles, because they are so improbable and they aren't observed, they are not scientific by definition. So we're going to cover that question. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the fundamental question in the creation and evolution debate. A lot of people talking about debating creation and evolution, but I'm going to cover what I believe is the most fundamental question in that debate. So the Bible-believing scientists and the founding of science. What do you think all of these people on the right here have in common? And you can see these scientists are really the fathers of these scientific disciplines. Antiseptic surgery, Joseph Lister; bacteriology, Louis Pasteur; calculus, the calculus, Leibniz and Isaac Newton both developed the calculus, among a whole host of other things. You probably know Isaac Newton from physics, force equals mass times acceleration, and he sort of developed the telescope and many other things. Celestial mechanics, Johann Kepler. Chemistry, Robert Boyle. You probably, any chemistry students here? Any physics students? Okay, some physics students. So you might recognize some of these, even computer science. Any computer science majors? Okay, no computer science majors. But anyway, the founders of these fields, actually Charles Babbage was the inventor of really the first computer. The first one would compute 25 times, and then he developed one that would do 4,000 calculations. And anyway, these people, what do you think they all had in common? This is a time you can't answer a question. You can talk right now. Pardon? They were all Christian. Yes, absolutely, you are right. They were all Christian believers, and they had a very strong faith and a belief in the accuracy and reliability of the Bible. But this is not all. Men of science, so they were men of science and they were also men of God. There was no warfare between them. Here you have many fields, and they're considered the founder of the fields. Michael Faraday, electromagnetics. I won't go into all of them, but there's a list of more of them. Actually, if you look at the founders of almost most major scientific fields, you will find that a large majority of them actually were believers in the accuracy and reliability of the Bible, and they had a strong faith. So here's a few more. Even isotopic chemistry, natural history. So you go to the Natural History Museum in Albany, or you go in New York City, and you'll see all kinds of things about evolution and maybe things that maybe undermine faith in the Bible. But actually, the actual founder of natural history himself didn't believe any of that stuff. He believed that the Bible was completely accurate when it talked about it. So I'm not going to belabor you with all these slides because I don't have the time to go into all of these. But you can see thermodynamics, oceanography, systematic biology, thermodynamics, invertebrate paleontology, even paleontology itself. The man who is the father of paleontology was a Christian believer in the Bible. Now I'm going to go into those are just a few of them. In notable inventions and discoveries by creationist scientists. There you can see some of them. Barometer, the law of the biogenesis law, basically life comes from pre-existing life. Louis Pasteur, by the way, interesting French scientist, lived in the 1800s. There was a belief that life would spontaneously generate by chance. Now, people have disproven that. Some people thought you put a meat out and spontaneously it develops flies. It develops fly larvae, and you leave it out for a long enough period of time, and it then develops flies. However, a man by the name of Redding disproved that because he put in a container, he put a cloth over it and tightly sealed the cloth so no flies could get it, and he proved that flies did not spontaneously generate in the meat. It would get rancid, but it wouldn't develop flies unless flies could go in and lay their eggs. But people still believed at the time of Louis Pasteur that life if you have a broth, a meat broth, and you heat it, sterilize it, and you just leave it out, it will spontaneously generate microbiology, microbacterium in it. And Louis Pasteur, however, he was a student of the Bible. He didn't think that was the case. So he did an experiment to show that he developed a special flask that would allow air in, but wouldn't allow dust or any kind of spores into it, and it did not develop any bacteria in it. And he proved once and for all that spontaneous generation does not happen. And he also, by the way, discovered penicillin. He was the one who was the founder, basically, of antibacterial agents that we use, antibiotics, developed vaccines. He developed the pasteurization of milk. I mean, he did a ton of things, advancements of science, and he basically disproved this idea of spontaneous generation. So I won't go into all of these, but you can see there's a lot of discoveries by men of science who are also men of God. Okay, we will go on to the next. Now, the founding of major universities, because I only have 30 minutes, I'm going to go pretty fast. But the founding of the major universities, most people don't know this. I didn't know this until I started looking into it. Actually, the university I went to myself, Case Western Reserve University, was fairly secular by the time I went to it in the late 1970s. I graduated in 1981, I'm dating myself. But that university, although it was pretty secular when I was going to it, I was looking into the history of it, and I found out that even Case Western Reserve University was founded by a man named Hudson, who, because of a conversion to Christ and the change of his life, he had a call to found a university and went to the Western Reserve, which was it wasn't a state, Ohio. Ohio is now a state, different states, but it was the land of the Western Reserve. There was no state, and he went to the Western Reserve and he founded the university that I went to. But of course, the university wouldn't say anything about it in this day and age. But there's many universities. Actually, universities started in the 11th and 12th century in Europe, mostly in Spain, France, Italy. And the idea of a university, even the idea of a university, is that there is diversity. There are many different fields. There's a diversity of fields. You might have biology, you'll have chemistry, you have mathematics, you'll have history, you'll have literature, you'll have music, you'll have art. So you have many different fields. However, these diverse fields are unified under one thing. They all point to one thing, they all have a similar thing in common, they all are unified under, and they believe they were unified under God, under theology. Everything points to God, everything, and they really believed everything points to Jesus. Everything points to Jesus, who is the creator, and they're all unified in one place under the theology that they would call the queen of the sciences. So you didn't have just somebody in the mathematics department had nothing to do with the art department, had nothing, they just study different fields, different colleges, but the idea of a university was unity and diversity. So we have lots of separation now. Somebody who's in the biology department, it'd be unusual that they know a lot about art, that they might know a lot about music. Myself, people come up to me and they say, why did you study these different topics? I mean, wow, it seems like you were into physics and chemistry, and you were an engineer, and then you went to law school? Huh? What's that about? Wow, that seems really different. People don't usually do that. And then you went into psychology? That's got to be totally different. How do those relate to each other? They'll ask me. Well, and I have an opportunity to tell them, because they are all related. I'm trying to discover how God made human beings, how God made the world, and what he had to do it, what was in his mind in doing that, and why things are the way they are. So I was very excited and very interested in many different topics, and that's why. And the university was designed to be that way, under one heading and one meaning. So if you're seeking for like the meaning of things, not just understanding, well, how do I do this one thing, but what is the greater meaning, and what is the meaning of my life? That is what they were interested in. So 106 of the first 108 colleges in the U.S. were started by the Christian faith, on the Christian faith. By the close of 1860, there were 246 colleges in America. Only 17 of these were state institutions. Almost every other one was founded by a Christian denomination or by individuals with an avowed religious purpose. For example, Harvard College in 1636. Now, you won't hear this on Harvard at all today, but when it was founded, here's an original rule of Harvard College. Let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main ends of his life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life, John 17:3, and therefore to lay Christ in the bottom as the only foundation of all sound knowledge and learning. Now, would you expect a professor at Harvard to say that today? Probably not. But that was the founding. Yale University was started by Congregational ministers in 1701. Quote, for the liberal and religious education of suitable youth to propagate in this wilderness the blessed Reformed Protestant religion. Princeton was associated with the Great Awakening in the United States. It was founded by Presbyterians in 1746. The Reverend Dixon became first president and he declared, cursed be all that learning that is contrary to the cross of Christ. Now, if you go to Yale today, you might have, and you say that, they will probably have a fit, but you say, did you realize this is how the university was actually founded? So the third question is, what is science? And what is religion? So to ask the question, I asked the question at the beginning, is the Bible scientific? So when you ask a question, you have to think about what you're asking, what are the definitions of the terms. I did research when I was doing my undergraduate at Case Western Reserve University. I did some biomedical research. I did some research on the structure of some polymers using X-ray diffraction. And I had to define, you have to define what are the questions that you're trying to ask and what are the terms that you're using. And when I did psychology, I did research in psychology in my PhD. One of the fundamental questions that you have to ascertain when you're starting the research, if you could go on and any of you do a PhD and you're going to do a dissertation, you're going to have to define what you're researching. And one of the most important things you define is what are the operational variables, or what are the terms? What do the terms mean? So you can't just throw around science and one person thinks science is this and the other person defines it another way. You have to really define it. And also, as far as religion, what's religion? So we're gonna do a little bit of this today. What about science versus the Bible? Is religion something totally different than science? Is it a description of, often I hear, well, science is in this category and religion is in that category, and if you want to talk about this topic, go over to the religious studies department, you got to talk about it over there. We're talking about science over here. And by the way, science can't, it can't disprove religion, but the religious people can, have their beliefs and stuff, affects their lives, but what we're doing is hard science over here. So there's sort of like, religion is about values, it's belief, it's faith, it's feeling, it's emotion. It's about, it gives you meaning and purpose in life, which science can't do. It's invisible, it's in the heart. Whereas science is about facts, it's giving us the modern age. It's repeatable, it's observable, it's testable, and it's about really understanding things from your head rather than your heart. If you see the movie, anybody see the movie The Life of Pi? A couple of people saw that. See in the middle of that movie, there's this discussion about religion and science, and the gentleman says, well, religion hasn't given us that much in thousands of years, and science has given us spectacular advancements in 100 years. But he didn't really understand that what really the facts are. And actually, the maker of the movie said there's a difference between religion and science, but science can never disprove religion. And by the way, religion is really a matter of the heart. Well, I'm going to say, so there's a wall between the two. You don't cross over. However, clearly, most of the greatest scientists that ever lived didn't think this way, as I just showed. They didn't have a wall between the two. They didn't think they were two totally different things. Francis Bacon, by the way, established the scientific method, and he started with empirical observations, and which then through inductive reasoning, led to higher axioms and to demonstrate what was actually true. This is the basis of the scientific method. You make observations, you do tests, and you build up your higher axioms and your theories from that. So Bacon was actually a lawyer. This method is similar to building a case in eyewitness testimonies in the courtroom. He actually was a lawyer, so the legal method is really similar to the scientific method. Most religions are non-scientific, by the way, but Christianity is based on eyewitnesses and observations of events. 1 Corinthians 15:14, Paul says, if Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead, literally in history, a man you saw walking around and saw him die in public, if he did not rise from the dead, then we might as well just abandon the whole Christian faith. You can test and prove, and you can fall. If you can prove that, you can falsify the religion and eliminate it. No other religion is like that. If you rolled out the body of Jesus, bones of Jesus, and you could demonstrate that, you would kill the Christian religion. Because it's all based on an observable historical fact. Now this is what science is. It's about observations and observing facts. So Christianity, among all religions, is really the one that is scientific. If you ask a Buddhist, he'll tell you you should follow the Eightfold Path, and you'll feel really, you'll find enlightenment. If you ask a Hindu, he'll say, pick your God and try it, and you're going to like it. If you ask a Muslim, they'll say, well, the book of the Quran is so beautifully written. But there's no historical fact that is based on. Muhammad didn't die and rise from the dead. He didn't really do any miracles to validate this is true. He went off in a cave. He had a revelation he says that he had, and people wrote it down. But there's no observable test of any of these other religions. But only Christianity is in principle falsifiable, and therefore it's scientific, I say, in the true sense of the word. So if we're going to test religious claims, if it doesn't work for anything else, it doesn't work for historical questions, it doesn't work for scientific questions, it's not going to work for religion. And if it works somewhere else, investigation, observation, drawing conclusions from that, then it's going to work in religion. So we should use the same methods, and that's what I advocate. Now, now what about faith? People will ask this question, what about faith? Well, isn't faith something that's not about science, it's about belief and understanding something, putting your faith in something and believing it? Isn't that a matter of just the heart? And it's very different from anything else that we do in the natural world, the scientific world. I say you can reach maybe by observations and by testimony beyond a reasonable doubt. And there you have a lady and her two children. They're looking across the street. And she looks both ways. She can trust her eyes. Pretty well, we can trust our eyes, but not 100% because human observation is not absolutely perfect, right? Sometimes we make mistakes. She looks both ways, doesn't see a car coming, and what does she do? She starts walking across the street, and she even puts her two children at risk. So she's willing to risk herself and her two children based on a not 100% absolute observation. Something that's based on her fallible eyesight and powers of observation. Now notice, she doesn't take 99% of herself across the street. She takes 100% of herself and 100% of her children across the street. What I say, what faith really is faith is what is the commitment. When I have enough evidence, when I have a probability, a high probability, and I make the commitment of 100% of myself to an action, that's what faith is. Faith is what jumps to that gap between a high probability and me committing myself to something. So I don't think that people should just jump into something. Well, this religion feels good, I'm going to jump into it. I think you should really check it out. And if you haven't checked it out, I challenge you to really check it out and find out, because you don't want to make the wrong decision and get hit by a car. Well, you don't want to make the wrong decision about eternity either. So I'm advocating that faith is basically just something that we do every day. By the way, when you sat in your chair, you came in and you saw a chair. Well, you have certain experience with chairs. You probably believe that the person who engineered the chair, the person who made the chair, probably did a good job, and the chair's going to hold your weight. And then you turn around and you sat down in the chair. Now, you sat down 100% of yourself, but you don't have 100% surety that that chair is going to hold you. But you made a commitment to sit in that chair. It was the faith in your powers of observation and then your commitment to sit down in the chair. So we do this every single day, and scientists are doing this and they're using faith every single day too. It's not something different. So although the Bible is not a scientific textbook, when it speaks about natural phenomena and about scientific phenomena, I found that it is accurate. As in archaeology, some statements, even about science, are not fully understood until later. We don't really understand some of the things that the Bible does say and talk about, but oftentimes you just have to wait until the evidence catches up. That's been the case again and again in archaeology, by the way. People have thought, well, the Hittites didn't exist for many, many years. Scholars believe, oh, well, there's no mention of Hittites anywhere else but in the Bible. And then somebody discovered a Hittite culture in Mesopotamia, and now you can study Hittite studies at many major universities because there's enough information on the Hittites. So you just got to wait. Some of the things maybe you don't understand, but I'm saying even the things you don't understand, they aren't really necessarily wrong. They're not fully understood, some of them. But the Bible has and I also rest on the fact that Jesus, who demonstrated. By the way, I'm not demonstrating this tonight, but in the next lecture we're going to do, which is going to be November 16th, November 17th, I'm going to talk about this. How do we know that Jesus actually did this? This is the historical analysis, legal historical. How do we know that he actually did what the Bible says he did? We're going to go into that later. But if he did, and he demonstrated the power over the laws of nature, and he validates the Bible, then I would go with his word, because he had the power to do things that nobody else could do. So, science in the Bible. Here's an example of science in the Bible. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Does anybody know what that verse is about? Who's talking to who? Yes, Mark.
He's talking to Abraham.
God's talking to Abraham, right? That's in the book of Genesis. So, the book of Genesis was written by who? Moses. Moses wrote the book of Genesis in probably about 1400 BC. So that's almost 3,500 years ago. And he's saying that I will make your descendants. So even Moses writing it, God probably spoke it to Abraham a long time before that, but Moses records it at least 3,500 years ago. He's saying he's going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Well, could anybody possibly count the sand on the seashore? I mean, that's an impossible task. But the stars in the sky, at that time, they didn't have any telescopes until the 1400s. Nobody could see more stars in the sky than maybe about 6,000. With really good eyesight, I think they probably had good eyesight, maybe better eyesight back then, and no light pollution. You could see maybe about 6,000 stars in the sky. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't sound like that verse, maybe there was a mistake in it. It doesn't make much sense until we discovered the telescope and we saw, wow, there's hundreds of millions of stars out there. And not only that, but the Hubble's telescope, when we could send a telescope beyond the Earth's atmosphere that could look into deep space and calculate and actually collect light from a point in space over a long period of time because of computers and readjustments of the telescope, we could get long time exposures. We discovered some areas of the sky that we thought only had a few stars had galaxies, and some areas had 100 galaxies, each containing 100 million or more stars. We had no idea how big the universe was, but the Bible 3,500 years ago knew. So other science in the Bible, I'm not going to go over a lot of things of science in the Bible, I'm just going to give you a few examples. It says in Job 26:7, he suspends the earth over nothing. Now this was at a time This is, by the way, the oldest book probably in the Bible, maybe 1800 or older at the time of the patriarchs. It's considered older than Genesis, probably. And other cultures at the time had a flat earth. You know, Egypt had it riding on a turtle and different kinds of ideas of what the earth was. And yet the Bible says he suspends the earth over nothing. It's hanging over nothing. The best way they could describe it, we now know, of course, that the earth is suspended in space. It is suspended basically over nothing. He sits enthroned above the sphere of the earth, Isaiah 40:22 says. And so that's talking about knowing that the earth was spherical. People who say, oh, the Bible describes a flat earth. The Bible doesn't say anything about a flat earth. There's nothing in the Bible indicating the earth is flat. It actually says that it's spherical. What was seen was not made out of what was visible, Hebrews 11:3. They didn't know that everything in the universe, all the matter in the universe is actually made from energy, invisible energy. So there's a lot of things in the Bible that do match up with science. So now I'm going to talk about what about miracles. So first I have to discuss logical fallacies. When I went to undergraduate, I didn't really study logical fallacies, which I had. You can tell a lot of politicians, can just tell when they're telling logical fallacies if you understand them. But it's basically an element of argument that's flawed. Essentially, it renders the line of reasoning, if not the entire argument, invalid. So here's one example, circular reasoning. Some people will say, well, the Bible says Jesus is God, Jesus says the Bible is inerrant, but therefore the Bible is inerrant, it's the Word of God, and the Bible says Jesus is God, and round and round it goes. So that's circular reasoning. I would never use that kind of reasoning to demonstrate a point. And when I do the November 17th, I won't use circular reasoning. I'm going to start basically from just a secular standpoint of historical investigation and build up from there. So another example of circular reasoning is this reasoning against miracles. That miracles can't happen by definition. So therefore, people start with this assumption, and then therefore all testimonies about them are either added to the text or they're not meant to be taken literally because miracles really can't happen, so that had to be people kind of making up stories. So therefore, the premise is true that miracles can't happen. Round and round it goes. The problem with this is that we discover what's true by observations, not by presuppositions. We have to observe the world to find out what's true, not decide ahead of time. So in a contingent universe, you can't say what's possible or impossible unless you check under every rock over all time. You have to look, you have to observe. That's the scientific method, not starting beforehand, thinking you know what can and can't happen in the universe. So are you an open-minded agnostic or a closed-minded agnostic? Here's how I define those two terms. People who say, I don't really know if God exists, I'm agnostic about it. I ask them, well, okay, but would you be willing to consider evidence? When I was a skeptic, I was in college. I started college, I was a skeptic. I thought people would say Jesus rose from the dead, and I said, well, why do you think he rose from the dead? And they would say, you have to have faith. And I got very irritated with them because, come on, give me something else. Seriously? And I became a hardcore skeptic. I took no prisoners. I was just brutal. I said, I don't want any wishy-washy thinking. But at some point in the middle of my college career, God reached down and somehow grabbed me, and I just knew he was real. And I just fell to my knees in his presence, and I gave my life to him. But before I'd done that, the week before, I had decided I was going to go to a seminar that a friend had said, you should check out the evidence. This lawyer, dean of the law school, is coming in. He's going to talk about history, the history of the Bible, historicity of these events. And I was an open-minded agnostic. I was willing to listen and hear. So a closed-minded agnostic is somebody who doesn't know if God exists, but he's absolutely sure that nobody can know. So don't show me anything because I know you can't know, nobody can know. So the question is, are you open-minded or closed-minded? It's okay to be an agnostic. Just be open-minded about it. And if you're here tonight, then I believe that you are an open-minded agnostic, and kudos to you. So I say, show me the money, just the facts. So the last question we're going to deal with, and we started a little late, so I apologize, but we will have plenty of time for questions. And I really invite your questions, by the way. I love questions, and no question is really bad or off limits. Don't say, oh, I should know this or not. because I guarantee you that somebody else in the room is probably thinking the same question. When I was at Case Western Reserve University, and I was in a large class of chemistry students taking organic chemistry, I would ask, there was about 300 people in the room, and this was a major class people had to take. And I would always ask a question because I didn't understand something. And I was the only one asking questions. So other people, dozens of people come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. So don't be afraid to ask the question. Creation and evolution. This is a big question. So again, I talked about defining terms. It's very important to define the terms. And what is evolution? What exactly do we mean by evolution? Here's my definition of evolution, because some people say microevolution, macroevolution. Does evolution mean change? Change through time? I changed my clothes this morning. Does that mean I was evolving? Or what does it really mean? So I'm clearly going to clearly and specifically define the term. Evolution I define as matter plus, what do you think the next term is? Time. Okay. I'm saying energy, right? Matter plus energy plus, you got it right, time, right? So if you have matter plus energy plus time, and if you have enough matter and enough energy, and you have a long, long period, enough time, you're going to get life, all right? That's how I define evolution. That's the equation for evolution. Now, the next one is I'm going to define creation. When I talk about creation, I'm just using an equation to say, well, what's the definition of the creation? I say it's matter plus, what do you think? Energy? Anybody else? God? Well, if you put God in there, they're kind of the equation, it's the infinite explodes the equation, so I don't put God in there. It could be, well, here's what it is. I call it the I factor. Now I got this, I'm not original with this, I got this from Dr. A. Waller-Smith, who has 3 earned doctorates in the natural sciences. He's dead now, but he's brilliant. If anything you can read by him, you're going to learn a lot. Dr. A. Waller-Smith, I don't take credit for this, but I is information. So this is what's called the I factor. Information can also be described as a concept, idea, in scientific lingo, teleonomy. But the I factor, if you put the I factor in, you will get life out. Now the question is, so what's information? And what about these 2 equations? Let's put these 2 equations to the test. I have a tuna fish can here, regular tuna fish can from Price Chopper, and it's probably been around a year. It's probably going to be on my shelf another year. I don't know, but what's in this can was once alive and kicking in the ocean. It's swimming around, and it was sealed and sterilized and put in a can. Now this can, by the way, this is the perfect ingredients. These are the perfect ingredients for life. You don't have to start with dirt. You're starting with amino acids and sugars and all kinds of trace elements in exact proportions that you need. Perfect for starting. Perfect starting recipe for life. Matter in this can. It's sealed, sterilized, and put on the shelf. Now, this can, will it spontaneously develop life in it? Anybody? We don't observe that. Actually, nobody's observed that. Scientists don't observe that. We have observations of tin cans, and if they don't have a hole in them, if they're sealed, they stay sealed, they won't develop it. By the way, this is thermodynamically open. You can heat the can up, cool it. You can put energy in and out. But what you can't put into it is information because it's sealed. So if you do this, now we have, by the way, I looked this up. We make about 200 billion canned food items a year are produced in the world. 200 billion a year. They probably sit around the shelf more than a year, but I'm just going to say, be conservative. They sit on the shelf in the grocery store and your shelf for maybe a year before they get used. And nobody's ever observed life, a new life form spontaneously arising in the sealed tin can. Now, there are other kinds of containers, like glass containers as well, but I'm just going to talk about the canned food industry. Now, the canned food industry has been around for longer than 50 years, but I'm just going to estimate 50 years times 200 billion a year. Let's say they sit around 1 year. So what is that? How How many can years is that about? Anybody? 200 billion times 50? How much is that? 10? Yes, 10,000 million. 10 trillion. So that's the equivalent of 10 trillion can years of observation and experiment. That's scientific. 10 trillion can years of observation, and nobody's ever observed life arise spontaneously in the can. So guess what? Louis Pasteur was right. The evolution kind of moved the ball. Yes?
In terms of can, there's no exchange of matter. You said
It's thermodynamically open.
It's not, there's no
There's no information can go in and out of it. But it's thermodynamically open
Yes,
because you can put heat in and out. See, energy can go in and out, but you can't, the thing that you can't do is you can't put any information in it. Do you understand that?
You can't exchange matter. Earth was able to exchange matter with asteroids and all this other stuff. The can is closed. Yes, you're right. That is thermodynamically open, but there's no exchange of matter.
There's no exchange of matter, but the point is, if you were to exchange matter, if you had multiple different cans and you sealed them off from any life going into them, and you had a can here and you had a valve here and you can exchange matter back and forth, it really wouldn't make any difference. The point is, if you have the can sealed off from any spores, any genetic codes, any information coming in, we know from scientific observation that, just observing it doesn't happen. Now, if we had one time when it did happen, then we could say there's a probability of 1 time in 10 trillion. But we don't have any times when you can. I'm going to be done in a few minutes, and we can discuss this. But this is very good questions, great questions back there. I appreciate that. I love questions. Thank you. But let me finish, okay? Because I'm almost done, and then we'll have time for lots of questions. I like the questions, though. So if you take this.